The lightning cracked over the Lika hills, splitting the sky into jagged silver lines that illuminated the wet thatch clinging to our stone house. Rain drummed steadily on the roof, a rhythm older than the village itself, while the scent of damp earth and distant wood smoke seeped through the cracks in the walls. Inside, the single room held only the bare essentials: a clay floor worn smooth by generations, a rough-hewn table, and the low embers of last night's fire. My mother A.U.K. sat near the hearth, her hands still from the day's work, listening to the storm. She had crafted the wooden egg, beater drying on the shelf, its joints fitted so precisely it never splintered even after 20 years of use. My father Militon knelt in the corner, his priest's vestments laid aside, murmuring prayers into the silence between thunderclaps. The village slept deeply under the downpour, every stone cottage huddled against the wind. No dogs barked, no shutters rattled loose, just the steady pulse of rain on oak and beech forests stretching toward the horizon. A single oil lamp cast long shadows across the room, its flame trembling but unyielding. The stone walls, thick as a man's arm, absorbed the chill from outside, keeping the air cool and smelling faintly of moss. On the table, a chipped bowl held last night's bread crusts, hard as flint. Near the door, a pair of leather boots stood stiff with dried mud, laces frayed from riverbank walks. The clay floor felt smooth beneath bare feet, cool even in July heat, with patches worn deeper where generations had stood while grinding grain. A wooden spoon rested beside an iron pot, both scarred from years of use. Outside, the stream behind our house rushed louder than usual, carrying branches from the hills down to the valley. The sound was a constant hum beneath the storm's fury, steady as a heartbeat. This was the night I came into the world, though I remember it only as a story passed down like the recipes my mother recited. She could summon entire epics from memory, lines upon lines of Serbian poetry, learned without ever touching a book. The midwife later claimed the lightning was a bad omen, but Heyuke only smiled at the storm, her face lit by sudden flashes. She knew the language of tools and threads, how a well-turned spindle could spin wool finer than any factory machine. Her fingers had shaped looms and churns from scraps, each piece fitting without nails. I watched her hands often, calloused but sure, moving with a quiet certainty the world never understood. The Orthodox church bell stood silent in the square, its rope soaked through, while the wind pushed against the shutters like a persistent guest. The hills beyond Smiljan held beech trees so dense their roots knotted underground like ancient veins. By dawn, the rain would leave the grass heavy with droplets, each one holding a perfect reflection of the gray sky. My father's prayer book lay open on the shelf, its pages stained with candle wax. He believed storms carried messages, though he never said what they meant. The air tasted of wet wool and cold stone, a familiar comfort even then. Somewhere in the darkness, a horse shifted in its stall, hooves scraping on packed earth. The village existed in this rhythm: earth, rain, silence. Long before I drew breath and long after I left, time moved slowly here, measured by seasons rather than clocks. The streams carved paths through limestone over centuries, patient and unseen. I think of that house often now, its walls holding memories tighter than they held back the rain. Sleep comes easier when I recall the steady drumming on the thatch, the way the firelight danced on hay, Yuka's face. The storm passed, the earth dried, and the world continued, one quiet breath at a time. I came into the world on the 10th of July, 1856, in the village of Smiljan, where the Austrian Empire's maps ended and the Lika Hills began. Midnight held the scent of rain-soaked pine and the distant tang of wood smoke from hearths grown cold. My first breath filled lungs beneath a thunderstorm's roar, lightning splitting the sky above. Stone cottages huddled against the dark. My father Milutin, the Orthodox priest, knelt by the window, his prayer beads clicking like dry seeds in his palm. My mother Ayuka, sweat on her brow, traced the sign of the cross on my forehead, with a calloused thumb still smelling of yeast and flour. She whispered words lost in the storm's fury, her voice steady as the oak beams holding up our roof. The midwife later called it an ill omen, a child born in lightning's glare. My mother only tightened her hold, her strength a quiet anchor in the chaos. Life unfolded to the rhythm of wheat ripening under a pail. Sun and the slow turning of seasons in the high valley. I remember the cool stone floor, beneath bare feet on summer mornings, the rough wool of my shirt against skin still warm from sleep. My mother moved through our home like a weaver at her loom, her hands never still. She'd take broken tools or scraps of wood from the shed and shape them into something new by dusk. I'd sit on the packed earth floor of her workshop, watching her fingers fly. She built egg beaters from bent spoons and wooden handles, the wearing mechanism clicking like a cricket in her palm. A loom appeared one autumn, its frame assembled from salvaged planks, the shuttle gliding smooth as river ice. She never sketched a thing, yet every gear fit, every joint held true. Her mind held the whole machine. Before the first piece was shaped, I learned to see it too. The invisible workings behind the wood and metal. A complete water mill would form in my head, gears meshing, water turning the wheel, before I ever touched a single timber. Then came the day Dane fell. He was riding the bay mare along the ridge path above the village, his laughter carrying down to where I played by the well. I saw the horse stumble on loose stones, heard the sharp crack that wasn't thunder. My brother lay still in the mud, the horse standing quiet beside him. One hoof print dark in the earth near his head. Father arrived first, his cassock snagging on thistles. He knelt, touched Dane's cheek, then stood without a sound. His silence filled the space where sobs should have been, heavier than the storm at my birth. Mother wept later, her face buried in a homespun towel. The salt smell sharp in the small room. The hollow where Dane's voice had been grew wide and deep. I counted the cracks in the clay of an each night, over and over, until the numbers held the silence at bay. 5 became 10, 10 became 20. The rhythm a thin thread against the dark. The village well became my quiet place. Its stone rim was worn smooth by generations of hands, cool to the touch even at noon. I'd sit there, trailing fingers in the water, watching dust motes dance in the sunbeam cutting through the well's mouth. The water tasted of iron and deep earth, drawn up in a wooden bucket rough with age. Sometimes I'd count the bricks lining the well's throat, 112 exactly, tracing each mortar seam with a fingertip. The counting felt like a tether, keeping me from drifting into the visions that came unbidden. I'd see entire machines whole in my mind's eye, a windmill's sails turning, the precise fit of cogs within a clock with such clarity I could almost feel the wood grain beneath my imagined fingers. These pictures arrived without warning, bright and sharp as sunlight on snow, and lingered long after I closed my eyes. They were not dreams, but something more solid, pressing against the real world. My father's church stood small and white among the pines, its onion dome catching the morning light. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of beeswax candles and old timber. Sunlight filtered through the high windows, illuminating motes of dust and the faded gold leaf on the iconostasis. I'd watch the candle flames, their gentle sway holding a rhythm like my counting. Father's voice rose in chant, deep and resonant, filling the space between the icons. After services, the villagers would gather, their wool cloaks damp with mist, voices low as they shared news of the harvest or the health of the flocks. I learned the weight of silence there, the space between notes in the chant, the way grief settled like dust after the singing stopped. The church held us, stone and wood and candle smoke, a fixed point in the valley's turning. Ambient passage 1, the worn wooden workbench in my mother's workshop, holds the egg beater she built last winter. Its spoons, polished smooth by constant use, gleam dully under the single high window. Sawdust clings to the rough, hewn legs, mixing with flakes of dried egg white near the base. A chisel rests beside a half-carved wooden gear, its blade catching a sliver of afternoon light. The scent of pine shavings and machine oil lingers, sharp and clean. Dust motes drift slowly above the tools, undisturbed by the stillness. My fingers remember the vibration of its wearing, The precise click of its mechanism, the way it transformed stillness into motion. We moved to Karlovac when I was 10, seeking schools that offered more than the village priest could teach. The town felt vast compared to Smiljan, its streets paved with smooth river stones, the buildings taller, their shutters painted bright blue or green. Our new house stood near the river, the sound of water a constant murmur beneath the church bells. I enrolled at the higher real gymnasium, a stern building of pale stone with tall windows looking out on manicured lawns. The classrooms smelled of chalk dust and old paper, the desks scarred with generations of carved initials. Lessons in mathematics became a refuge. Numbers formed clean, perfect patterns in my mind, a language without the messy silence of grief. I devoured the problems, seeing solutions unfold like clockwork before I put pen to paper. The teacher, her professor, would pause, adjusting his spectacles. When I solved equations meant for older boys, he called it a gift, but it felt more like a compulsion, the numbers demanding order. The walk home from school took me past the town well, different from Smiljan's deep stone throat. This one was open, its basin wide and tiled, fed by a stone spout shaped like a lion's head. I'd count the tiles around the rim. 137, feeling the cool smoothness under my palm. Sometimes I'd stand for long minutes, watching the water ripple, tracing the path of a single leaf caught in the current. The counting ritual followed me, a quiet companion. On windy days, I'd watch the wheat fields beyond the town walls, the stalks bending and rising like a single green sea. The sight triggered visions of giant mills, their sails turning not with wind, but with the very pulse of the earth itself. The images were so vivid I'd feel the grain of the imagined wood against my cheek. Ambient passage to dawn light spills across the stone rim of the Smiljan village well. Dew beads on the coarse hemp, rope coiled neatly beside the wooden bucket. A single crow calls from the oak tree overhead, its voice sharp in the cool air. The still water reflects the pale sky, unbroken except for a single falling leaf making slow circles. The scent of damp earth and crushed thyme rises from the well's edge. A spider's web, jeweled with dew, stretches between two moss-covered stones. The world holds its breath in this quiet moment before the village stirs. Mother continued her work in Karlovac, her hands finding purpose in the new surroundings. She mended clothes with invisible stitches, transformed scraps of metal into useful hooks and hinges. One afternoon, I found her fashioning a small loom from a discarded packing crate. She hummed an old Serbian song, her fingers flying over the warped threads, the shuttle clicking back and forth. I watched the cloth grow, row by row, a simple pattern emerging from chaos. It was the same quiet focus she'd shown building egg beaters in Smiljan, the same belief that broken things could be made whole again. Her hands were maps of hard work, knotted and strong, yet capable of the finest detail. I saw the machine in her mind long before the shuttle began its dance. She never spoke of Dane, but her hands spoke for her, building, mending, creating order from the fragments left behind. The year. I stood before the Graham dynamo in Graz, its brass casing cool under my fingertips, the scent of machine oil sharp in the quiet room. The heavy machine hummed with a low vibration I felt through the worn wooden floorboards. Copper windings gleamed dully beneath protective glass, coiled tight around the iron core like serpents guarding ancient treasure. I watched the commutator segments spin, sparking angrily as the brushes scraped across them, wasting precious energy. My mind kept returning to that harsh friction, the unnecessary conversion from smooth, alternating flow to jerky direct current. The solution felt just out of reach, a shape forming in the corner of my vision. Sleep offered no relief, only restless hours staring at the ceiling plaster. The problem clung to me like damp wool. A quiet room in Graz University holds an old Graham dynamo under soft lamplight. The brass casing gleams faintly, its smooth curves reflecting warm yellow illumination. Copper windings coil meticulously around the iron core, visible through protective glass panels. The heavy machine rests on a worn wooden workbench, surrounded by scattered tools. Dust motes drift slowly in the single shaft of light entering the high window. The scent of aged paper and machine oil lingers in the still air. One can imagine Tesla's focused gaze studying the commutator segments late into the evening. His fingers might have traced the polished metal surfaces while pondering electromagnetic theory. The room feels suspended in time, holding the quiet concentration of discovery. Outside, a gentle breeze stirs the leaves of chestnut trees lining the courtyard path. The only sound is the occasional soft tick of a cooling radiator. This space embodies the unhurried rhythm of deep scientific contemplation. After Graz, Prague offered little respite. The city's grandeur felt distant, its stones cold beneath my boots. I found work drafting plans, my hands moving while my thoughts remained tangled with the dynamo's flaws. The rhythm of the drafting table, the scratch of pencil on paper, became a meditation. My body learned exhaustion, the deep ache behind the eyes that comes from staring too long at fine lines. I carried the weight of the Graham dynamo in my bones, its stubborn commutator a constant companion. Sleep, when it finally came, was thin and dreamless. I moved through the days like a shadow, the solution still hidden in the static. Then Budapest. The Central Telegraph Office in 1881 became my refuge. The familiar scent of ozone and hot wire greeted me each morning, a smell like after a summer storm. My work there involved the steady pulse of signals, the rhythmic click of relays. It grounded me, this daily task. My friend Anthony Sigeti joined me on long walks after work, his quiet presence a steady counterpoint to my restless mind. We spoke little of electricity, more of poetry, of the way light fell on the Danube. The city's chestnut trees were just beginning to bud, their new leaves a pale, fragile green against the gray stone. The air carried the faint promise of lilacs. One February afternoon, walking through V.A. Rosliget Park, the Danube murmuring its constant song nearby, Goethe's Faust rose unbidden to my lips. The lines about nature's hidden forces flowed easily. I recited them aloud, the cold air sharp in my throat, Anthony walking silently beside me. As I spoke the verse, describing the Earth's magnetic field, a sudden clarity pierced the fog. The rotating magnetic field. It unfolded before me, not as equations, but as a living thing, a seamless dance of invisible forces. I saw the coils, the precise timing, the smooth rotation without any commutator's harsh scrape. The vision was whole, complete, humming with its own perfect logic. I stopped walking, the words catching in my throat. Anthony looked at me, concerned. I dropped to my knees in the dusty path, ignoring the damp earth soaking through my trousers. With a stick, I drew the diagram swiftly in the fine. Soil, two coils set at right angles, the currents out of phase. The dust sketch showed the rotating field, the egg spinning upright. The park held the gentle rustle of bare branches and the soft murmur of the Danube River. Shade. The Graham dynamo weighed precisely 230 pounds. I stood again before that heavy machine years later, its significance transformed. My vision in Budapest had become the foundation, the polyphase system taking shape in detailed plans. The patents followed, each line a careful defense of that park. Bench insight. Westinghouse saw the truth in the drawings, the potential for a current that could travel far without heavy losses. He acquired the patents, recognizing their worth in the quiet battle shaping the future of light. The commutator spark, once a symbol of waste, became irrelevant. Sleep, in those years of drafting and defending, was often stolen in train compartments. The rhythmic clatter of wheels, a lullaby for the exhausted. A quiet room in Budapest holds the memory of that February walk. Sunlight filters through tall windows onto worn floorboards, illuminating motes dancing in the air. A single chestnut leaf, preserved under glass, rests on a simple wooden table beside an empty inkwell. The scent of old paper and river mist lingers faintly. One can imagine the scratch of a stick in dry earth, the urgency of a mind capturing lightning. The room feels charged with the echo of revelation, a moment suspended outside of time. Outside, the Danube flows steadily, its surface catching the afternoon light in shifting patterns. The only sound is the soft sigh of wind through distant trees. This space holds the breath before understanding. The validation came later, At the Chicago World's Fair in 1893, the fairgrounds blazed with light powered by the system born in VA Roslaget Park. Westinghouse's bid had won, the alternating current proving its strength across the vast exposition. I watched the crowds marvel at the brilliance. The hum of the generators, a deep bass note beneath the celebration. Within the Westinghouse exhibit, the egg of Columbus spun its copper oval on a wooden platform, demonstrating the rotating field, principle to curious onlookers. The device required no explanation. The spinning egg spoke plainly. It was a quiet triumph, witnessed by thousands who understood only the spectacle, not the years of sleepless nights that made it possible. The fair opened on May the 1st. The Danube's current never hesitates. The rhythm of academic life provided structure. But the true work happened in the silent hours. After Budapest, the path led through countless calculations, prototypes failing and succeeding in dimly lit workshops. The scent of burning insulation became familiar, the sting of ozone a constant companion. Sleep remained elusive, a guest who rarely stayed long. I learned to function on fragments, the mind working even when the body rested. The vision in the park was only the beginning, the first note of a long symphony. Each step forward demanded precision, the careful balancing of forces invisible to the eye. The commutator's flaw had been the key, turning frustration into a different kind of current. The Danube's flow never questioned its direction. A quiet room in a Chicago museum holds a small copper egg under soft light. The metal surface bears faint scratches from countless demonstrations, its shape smooth and cool to the touch. It rests on a simple wooden base, surrounded by old photographs of the fairgrounds lit brilliantly at night. Dust motes drift slowly in the single shaft of light entering the high window. The scent of aged wood and metal polish lingers in the still air. One can imagine the gentle hum of the induction motor beneath it, the steady rotation. The room feels suspended in time, holding the quiet moment of understanding. Outside, city sounds are distant and muffled. This space embodies the unhurried rhythm of a realized idea. The egg spins without visible cause. The Danube flows on. I stepped off the ship in New York Harbor on June 6, 1880, for with coal suit already gritting between my teeth, and a letter for Thomas Edison folded tight in my coat pocket. The docks smelled of tar and brine, the air thick with the cough of steamships and the shouts of dock workers hauling crates of tea and cotton. My boots sank into the wet cobblestones near Fulton Street, each step leaving a faint print in the soot that coated everything like volcanic ash. Gaslights flickered weakly against the perpetual twilight of Manhattan's sky. I carried only a small satchel containing my notebooks and a few changes of linen. The city felt immense and indifferent. Edison received me in his workshop above the machine factory, a cramped room smelling of ozone and hot copper. His eyes scanned the letter from Charles Batchelor, then fixed on me with sharp curiosity. He wore a dark frock coat stained with oil, his fingers stained with graphite from constant sketching. I demonstrated my improvements to his Gram dynamos, showing how I'd reshaped the commutator segments to reduce sparking. He watched silently as I adjusted the armature windings by hand, the brass humming under my touch. We worked late into the gaslit nights, the windows black with soot outside. My designs cut the dynamo's copper losses by nearly 30%. He clapped me on the shoulder one evening, promising $50,000 if I completed the work. I believed him. I was young then. He handed me the check the next morning, its amount written plainly in dollars and cents. I stared at the zeros, my heart pounding against my ribs. Then he laughed, a dry chuckle that echoed off the brick walls. "My boy, you don't understand American humor," he said, tearing the check into small pieces. The scraps fluttered down like dead leaves onto the oily floorboards. I stood very still, the smell of machine oil sharp in my throat. That afternoon, I returned my tools to the bench. The workshop felt suddenly cold. I walked out into the coal-dusted street without looking back. For months, I dug trenches along Broadway, the shovel biting into frozen earth each dawn. My hands blistered and bled inside thin cotton gloves, the blisters splitting open with every thrust of the blade. The ditch walls rose steep on either side, shadowed and damp, smelling of wet clay and old coal ash. Horse-drawn carts rumbled overhead, their iron wheels grinding against the cobbles. I ate hard bread and cheese in silence beside other laborers, their faces smudged with grime. Edison's method was needle in haystack, testing countless filaments through brute repetition. Mine was born in quiet rooms, seeing the whole machine complete behind my eyes before a single wire was bent. Both approaches had their place. Neither erased the other. Pearl Street Station's red brick walls stood solid against the river wind near the Brooklyn Bridge approach. Its soot-stained windows glowed faintly from within, casting long shadows across the cobbles where I once dug. 6 massive dynamos hummed steadily in the basement, their copper windings spinning under gaslight to power the first 400 street lamps. The scent of hot insulation and ozone seeped through the manhole covers into the street above. Steam hissed softly from copper pipes along the alleyway, mixing with the smell of horse manure and coal dust. Passers-by hurried past without glancing at the unmarked door. Inside, engineers monitored the meters with quiet diligence, the rhythmic thump of the engines vibrating through the floorboards. This building lit Lower Manhattan for the first time just 2 years prior. Its steady pulse was the city's new heartbeat. Westinghouse found me years later, in a Pittsburgh hotel room, his handshake firm and dry. He spoke of alternating current systems with genuine curiosity, not skepticism. I sketched the rotating magnetic field on a napkin over coffee, the lines flowing from memory as easily as breathing. He saw the potential instantly. Without needing $50,000 as bait, we signed the papers in his office overlooking the Allegheny River, the ink drying slowly in the afternoon sun. My patents became the foundation for something larger than either of us imagined. The Chicago World's Fair illuminated itself entirely through our system in 1893. A vast canvas of light stretching across the Midway. Niagara Falls began feeding buffalo with clean power by 1896. These things happened without fanfare. They simply were. The egg of Columbus rests now in a glass case at the Chicago Historical Society, its copper shell polished to a soft sheen. The wooden base shows faint circular wear marks from countless demonstrations, the grain darkened by decades of handling. Sunlight catches the smooth curve of the egg as it sits perfectly still under museum lighting. A thin layer of dust has settled along the glass edges, undisturbed by visitors. The air smells faintly of aged wood and clean cotton. One can almost hear the low hum of the alternating current that once made it spin and rise upright. The room is quiet except for the distant murmur of the city beyond the windows. This small device explained everything without words. It remains a perfect testament to clarity. I never returned to Edison's workshop after leaving, though I passed Pearl Street Station many times on foot. The coal soot still clung to buildings, to clothes, to the inside of one's nose. Gaslights flickered in the evenings, their yellow glow reflecting dully off wet streets. My hands healed from digging ditches. The callus is softening with time. Westinghouse provided steady work and honest payment for the patents he needed. We spoke little of Edison's broken promise. It belonged to a different life. The war of currents raged in newspapers, but in my laboratory, I simply adjusted coil windings and measured phase angles. Niagara Falls roared with power we harnessed together. The water's voice was constant, reassuring. J.P. Morgan later funded my tower at Wardenclyffe with $150,000, a sum that felt immense then. He signed the papers in his library, the scent of leather and old paper thick in the air. I showed him diagrams of wireless transmission across the Atlantic, the lines clean and precise. He agreed to the figure without hesitation, his pen moving swiftly across the contract. When I asked for more later, he declined politely over tea, the steam rising from the porcelain cups between us. His refusal was final but not unkind. The tower stood incomplete, its skeleton against the Long Island sky. I accepted this as I had accepted the ditch digging, part of the work's rhythm. Vision requires patience. Patience requires solitude. The quiet hum of alternating Current became the world's new language, speaking through wires and transformers everywhere. I heard it in hotel rooms late at night, a gentle vibration beneath the floorboards. It carried light into homes far from city centers, a steady pulse through the darkness. My body grew thinner with age, my hands more fragile, but the hum remained constant. I watched pigeons circle the Woolworth building from my window, their wings cutting through the soot-laden air. The city slept beneath layers of sound. Traffic, distant trains, the whisper of electricity. Sleep came slowly sometimes, but the hum was always there, a companion in the stillness. It spoke of connection, of energy flowing where it was needed. This was enough. I remember the weight of that first contract with Westinghouse, the paper cool and crisp under my fingers in his Pittsburgh office. The scent of machine oil and coal smoke drifted through the open window that July afternoon in 1888. George's hands were rough from years in the rail yards, yet his signature flowed smoothly across the page. My polyphase patents felt like fragile seedlings placed in strong hands. He paid me fairly for the rights without haggling over the future. We both understood what this meant for the wires stretching across the country. Edison had already begun his campaign against alternating current. I saw the poster showing dogs convulsing under wires near City Hall. The sharp smell of burnt fur lingered in my memory from those demonstrations. Men in top hats gathered to watch stray dogs die on wooden platforms. Their fur crackled before the final stillness settled over the crowd. Edison sought to brand my work as dangerous and unnatural. He wrote letters to newspapers with shaky handwriting I recognized from our earlier talks. His campaign felt personal, though I knew it was merely business. He truly believed direct current was the only safe path forward. The city streets became battlefields of competing electrical claims. Wires tangled overhead like angry vines in the Manhattan rain. I watched workmen string copper lines with calloused hands and weary eyes. They carried the weight of this invisible war on their shoulders. The air tasted metallic after storms, charged with possibility and fear. My laboratory smelled of ozone and hot insulation late into those nights. I adjusted coils while listening to distant rumblings of the conflict. The first electric chair at Auburn prison used alternating current in 1890. I never attended but heard the low murmur of the crowd afterward. They spoke of a strange quiet following the final current. The argument grew very long before it ended. Edison's persistence revealed his own deep conviction about progress. His methods were harsh but born of genuine concern for public safety. He saw the flickering arc lights as a menace to ordinary homes. I understood his fear, even as I knew my system was sound. The war drained us both of patience and good feeling. We became ghosts haunting each other's dreams for years. The egg of Columbus rests now, within a climate-controlled museum display case. Its polished copper shell catches the diffuse overhead lighting with a soft, warm glow. The wooden base retains its original finish, slightly darkened by age and handling. Fine dust has settled gently on the surrounding glass enclosure over many years. The stillness of the room amplifies the quiet hum of the preservation system. One can almost see the subtle vibration that once made the egg rise and spin. The smooth wooden rim encircling the base shows faint wear marks from countless demonstrations. The air carries a faint scent of aged wood and clean glass. Outside the museum, city sounds are muffled, distant and unimportant. This object embodies a moment of clear scientific communication, free from confusion. Chicago welcomed 27 million visitors to its White City in 1893. I stood beneath the electric towers at night, feeling the hum through my boots. The fairgrounds glowed with steady light, banishing shadows from every courtyard. Westinghouse had won the bid against General Electric's direct current proposal. My polyphase system powered every fountain and sculpture across the grounds. The air smelled of popcorn and newly cut lumber under those bright arcs. Families strolled past exhibits, humming with motors and dynamos. I demonstrated the copper egg on a wooden platform near the main hall. Visitors gathered as it spun upright on its end, smooth and silent. Two-phase current made it dance, without visible connection to any source. Children pointed at the egg while their parents examined the base closely. The wooden surface felt warm from the coils hidden beneath it. My hands remembered the exact pressure needed to start the rotation. Many skeptics left convinced after watching that simple demonstration. The fair proved alternating current could light vast spaces safely and reliably. I saw Edison's men studying the installations with tight expressions. Their presence confirmed the victory was finally ours to claim. The city never slept during those months of celebration. Streetcars ran all night carrying tired visitors back to their hotels. My laboratory notes grew thick with observations from those busy weeks. The fair's success felt like a quiet vindication after years of struggle. Westinghouse secured the Niagara Falls contract soon after the fair closed. The scent of lake water and wet stone clung to my clothes that autumn. A lecture hall at the University of Prague in the early 1880s held a hushed anticipation before the physics demonstration began. Tall windows framed views of leafy courtyard trees, their branches gently swaying in a mild breeze. Sunlight illuminated swirling dust particles above rows of worn wooden desks, each scarred by generations of students. The scent of chalk dust and old paper filled the air, mingling with the faint odor of coal gas from laboratory burners. A professor carefully arranged brass instruments and glass tubes on a central demonstration table. their surfaces gleaming softly. The quiet murmur of students consulting notebooks created a low, scholarly hum. Polished stone floors reflected the dim gaslight, adding to the room's cool, measured atmosphere. Every object within the space spoke of careful observation and the patient pursuit of understanding natural phenomena. The room invited focused attention and calm, intellectual engagement with the mysteries of science. Niagara Falls thundered steadily on the morning we switched on the generators. Mist clung to my coat as I stood at the edge of the project site. The machinery vibrated through the wooden planks beneath my boots. Water plunged with a constant roar that shook the ground gently. My hands traced the smooth copper windings of the new alternators. They felt cool despite steam rising from the turbines below. On November 16, 1896, the current reached Buffalo 20, 2 miles away. The lights in the city flickered on without hesitation or complaint. I watched from a hotel window as streets filled with steady illumination. People gathered outside, pointing at the reliable glow above their heads. My vision of harnessing natural forces had become concrete reality. The falls supplied power, without conversion or intermediate steps. General Electric adopted alternating current fully after this achievement. Their engineers visited our installations with notebooks and measuring tools. They examined the transformers and transmission lines with quiet respect. I remembered Edison's early warnings about the dangers of high voltage. His concerns had shaped safer installations, even as he fought against them. The war ended not with surrender, but with exhaustion on both sides. We simply stopped arguing when the evidence became too clear to ignore. Buffalo's streets remained bright long after the generators quieted for maintenance. The hum of transformers became part of the city's nighttime soundscape. My laboratory in New York smelled of hot varnish and clean metal filings. Dawn light touched the mist rising from the base of Niagara Falls on a calm autumn morning in the 1890s. The massive curtain of water plunged steadily, creating a constant, soothing roar that vibrated gently in the cool air. Spray glistened like diamond dust under the rising sun, catching the light in fleeting rainbows. Wooden walkways creaked softly underfoot, worn smooth by countless visitors and workers. The scent of wet stone and ozone hung thick near the turbine halls. Machinery rumbled deep within the concrete structures, a steady heartbeat beneath the fall's roar. River currents swirled in eddies below the observation railings, pulling at loose debris. Tourists' voices carried faintly on the breeze, mingling with the natural symphony. Cool air carried the taste of fresh water and damp earth along the pathways. The power station's brick walls absorbed the morning chill, radiating it slowly as the day warmed. Every surface showed the patina of constant moisture and industry. This place transformed raw nature into quiet, usable energy without visible struggle. Edison visited my Colorado Springs laboratory once during the wireless experiments. His eyes scanned my magnifying transmitter, 51 feet across, without comment. We walked among the coils in silence, the scent of ozone heavy between us. He touched the wooden frame of the main tower with a calloused hand. Neither of us mentioned the war that had consumed our best years. He asked about the voltage levels with genuine curiosity, not challenge. I showed him the sparks jumping through the dry prairie air. The smell of burnt insulation reminded me of our earliest disagreements. We shared a simple meal in my tent, listening to the generator's steady thump. He left before dawn, his carriage wheels crunching on the gravel path. The sunrise painted the plains gold. As I returned to my notebooks, I never saw him again after that visit. The years had softened our edges like stones in a riverbed. His name appeared in my correspondence with Morgan during the Wardenclyffe years. I requested funds for transatlantic transmission, though the project remained unrealized. Morgan refused further support after the initial $150,000. The scent of his rejection letter lingered like stale cigar smoke. I understood his position even as the tower stood incomplete. Edison's later work with motion. Pictures showed his restless ingenuity remained. We both sought to illuminate the world through different means. His persistence deserved respect despite our differences. The electric chair haunted me more than any business dispute ever could. Ambient passage 2, dawn light, touched the mist rising from the base of Niagara Falls on a calm autumn morning in the Colorado air tasted thin and sharp, each breath carrying the dry scent of sagebrush and distant mountains. My wooden laboratory stood alone on the high prairie, 2,000 meters above the world's noise, its retractable roof groaning in the constant wind. I built the magnifying transmitter coil by hand, 51 feet of polished wood framing copper wire, the curve of it matching the Earth's own arc. My fingers grew callous, tightening the last connections under that vast, indifferent sky. The prairie wind never stopped pushing against the walls. It carried the smell of sun, baked soil, and wild rye grass. Nights here felt deeper than anywhere I'd known. The stars hung so close I could almost touch their cold light. I remember the chill seeping through my boots as I walked the empty fields before dawn. The silence had weight pressing gently against the ears. Distant thunder sometimes rolled across the plains like a slow drumbeat. I measured the earth's own quiet pulse beneath my feet. That first summer, the coil sang with voltages no man had seen. The scent of ozone filled the lab each time the switch closed, sharp and electric like after a mountain storm. I stood back as the arcs leapt from the terminal. Blue, white snakes crackling through the dry air. reaching 4 million volts. Their thunder rolled across the land, heard 15 miles away in the foothills. The wooden floor vibrated with each discharge. A deep thrumming I felt in my bones. Lamps lit wirelessly a mile distant, their glow soft in the high grass. Photographs later showed the coil wreathed in lightning, the air itself torn open by light. I watched the artificial storms I'd summoned dance against the black sky. The prairie wind carried the smell of burnt dust and hot copper. Modern scholars suggest Jupiter hums at 15.4 megahertz, a steady radio song from its ionosphere. I did not know this then. The earth felt alive under my instruments, humming a low note only the coil could hear. Dawn painted the eastern sky in pale washes of apricot and gray. The high prairie stretched empty for miles, dry grass whispering secrets to the wind. A single bleached fence post leaned against the horizon, its shadow long and thin on packed earth. Wildflowers, purple coneflowers, yellow prickly pears, nodded gently in the breeze, rooted deep in the stubborn soil. The air held the clean scent of warm sage and dry earth, sharp and ancient. Clouds drifted slow and high, casting soft, moving shadows over the land. Silence here was a living thing, deep and undisturbed except for the wind's constant murmur. The distant mountains formed a hazy blue line against the pale dome of the sky. This calm emptiness held the memory of fire and light. It invited quiet thought, a space where big dreams felt possible. July nights brought the most intense tests. The air grew thick with static before a storm, the grass crackling underfoot. I'd lie awake in the small room behind the lab, listening to the wind rattle the roof beams. The coil waited outside, a silent giant under the stars. One night in 1899, the recorder pen scratched an odd rhythm on the moving paper. Not the random hiss of atmospheric noise, but measured pulses. Tap, 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 tap. Regular as a heartbeat from some distant shore. I sat very still, the chill of the floorboards seeping through my slippers. The prairie wind sighed against the lab walls, but this sound came from the wires, clear and deliberate. My hands trembled slightly as I checked the connections, the brass cold to the touch. The scent of hot transformer oil lingered in the air. I wondered if the wind had found a new voice in my wires, or if something older, vaster, was calling through the dark. Scholars now believe my own equipment misfired, or Jupiter's storms leaked their song into my instruments. I still do not know for certain. The Earth resonates at 8 hertz, a frequency felt more than heard. That night, the silence after each pulse felt like waiting. The laboratory interior held only the essentials: rough wooden benches, glass jars of spare parts, the low hum of the oscillator in the corner. Dust motes danced in the single kerosene lamp's glow, catching the light like tiny stars. The smell of beeswax polish mixed, with the metallic tang of copper windings. I'd run my palm along the smooth edge of the workbench, worn smooth by countless adjustments. On quiet afternoons, I watched prairie dogs pop from their holes beyond the fence, their small heads turning toward the lab. The wooden roof beams creaked as the temperature dropped. Night sounds grew familiar. The rustle of grasshoppers, the distant howl of a coyote. The coil stood outside, a dark shape against the starfield. Its presence was a comfort, like an old friend keeping watch. I recorded frequencies until my eyes burned. The scratch of the pen the only sound. The high altitude made sleep light, dreams vivid and fleeting. Cool mountain air swept through the open roof as I prepared the coil for another run. The wooden structure shuddered slightly in the evening wind, its timbers settling with familiar groans. My hands moved automatically, checking the capacitor banks. The thick cables snaking across the floor, the scent of hot varnish from the coil's windings filled the space, sharp and resinous. I remembered the egg of Columbus spinning, upright on its end at the World's Fair, a copper egg dancing on wood. Its polished shell caught the fairground lights, warm and inviting. That simple device showed the world how currents could turn, how energy could flow unseen. Here in Colorado, I chased that same principle across the land itself. The dream was clear, make the earth itself sing with power. Wires would become unnecessary, energy flowing like water through stone. The prairie wind carried away the smoke from my pipe. My notes showed the resonance needed, a precise frequency to unlock the planet's hidden song. After the big discharges, the air smelled cleanly scorched, like lightning after a summer storm. I'd walk the perimeter, boots scuffing the dry earth, watching for scorch marks on the grass. The tall prairie grasses bent and whispered in the wind, their dry tips catching the moonlight. Distant thunder sometimes answered the coil's roar, a conversation across the sky. I felt the high altitude in my chest, a slight tightness that never quite left. On clear nights, the Milky Way stretched overhead, a river of cold fire. I'd lie back in the grass, the earth cool beneath my coat, and watch the stars. The coil's frame stood silent now, a dark outline against the starfield. Its wooden ribs held the memory of light. The scent of sage and warm soil rose from the ground. Silence pressed close, broken only by the wind's soft sigh through the grass. This land held space for big thoughts. It asked no questions, only listened. The dream of wireless power felt almost within reach here, under that endless sky. Scholars say Wardenclyffe used 60,000 feet of copper wire, a river flowing underground. I thought of Niagara's roar. The water's steady power turned to light for buffalo. My vision stretched further, to every city, every home, fed by the earth's own pulse. The high prairie wind carried the scent of possibility, I closed my eyes against the stars, listening for the earth's quiet song. The land on Long Island felt different. Under my boots that spring of 1901, damp salt air clinging to the wool of my coat as I walked the shoreline. J.P. Morgan's carriage wheels crunched over the gravel path, his polished shoes stepping carefully past puddles left by the morning tide. He smelled of Havana cigars and expensive soap. When we shook hands near the foundation stones, I showed him the plans spread on the rough wooden table inside the drafty shed, the ink lines sharp against the paper under the weak kerosene lamp. His check for $150,000 felt heavy in my pocket. A promise to build something the world had never seen. Marconi had sent 3 dots across the Atlantic using Hertzian waves, but I knew those signals wasted energy bleeding into the sky. My tower would draw power from the earth itself, sending currents through the ground to any receiver, free for anyone who needed light or heat. The wooden frame rose slowly beside the shore, 18 stories tall, its beams smelling of fresh cut pine and hot metal as workers hammered the joints. Copper sheets arrived in crates, their sharp tang mixing with sawdust and sweat. I climbed the scaffolding often, running my fingers over the smooth dumb at the top, cool as river stone even in summer sun. Morgan visited again that autumn, his overcoat buttoned tight against the wind whipping off the water. He stood beneath the half-built tower, looking up at the lattice of timber against the gray sky, his face unreadable. I spoke of connecting telegraphs and telephones into one seamless network, but my true hope remained unspoken: to send power itself through the planet's pulse. The ocean's steady rhythm filled the silence between us that afternoon. Sunlight gilded the weathered wooden structure. Near the shore one mild autumn afternoon, tall grasses swayed gently around the base of the unfinished tower, brushing against my trousers as I walked. A single rusted gear lay half buried in the earth near the foundation, its teeth worn smooth by rain and time. The sound of distant ocean waves mixed with the chirping of crickets in the tall grass. Fallen leaves drifted slowly across the empty courtyard, undisturbed by footprints. The scent of damp earth and salt air filled the quiet space completely. Shadows lengthened peacefully across the overgrown grounds as the sun descended. No machinery hummed. Only natural sounds remained in the stillness. The tower's skeletal frame cast long, calm lines against the fading light. A gentle breeze carried the last warmth of the day across the site. By 1904, the costs had grown beyond any sensible measure. The ledgers filled with figures that made my hands shake. Copper prices doubled when war tensions flared between Japan and Russia. The metal vanishing into battleships and artillery shells. I sat across from Morgan in his library, the firelight catching the silver in his temples. the smell of leather and old paper thick in the room. He asked how power could be built if it flowed through the earth like water through sand. His voice was quiet, final. I had no answer that satisfied. A man who counted pennies in millions. The last shipment of copper arrived late, delayed by shipping strikes, its surface already flecked with rust from the journey. I walked the site alone one October morning in 1905, the grass wet underfoot, the wind carrying the sharp smell of decaying leaves. The tower stood silent, its wooden bones creaking softly in the breeze. The copper dome tarnished green. I left the key on the drafting table inside the main building. The blueprints for resonant transformers still spread out like a promise. My footsteps were the only sound as I walked back to the train station. The weight of the empty pocket where the key had been. The abandoned Wardenclyffe laboratory held its breath in the quiet. Dust settled thick on the workbenches, muffling the edges of scattered tools. Sunlight through broken windows lit motes dancing above forgotten notebooks. The smell of mildew mixed with old oil and dried ink. A single crow feather lay near the rusted lathe, undisturbed for months. Crickets chirped steadily in the tall grass outside the open doorway. Fallen oak leaves drifted slowly across the courtyard, tracing slow circles in the wind. The ocean's distant murmur was the only sound besides the settling of wood. Shadows stretched long and calm across the empty floorboards as afternoon light faded. Time moved differently here, measured only by the slow creep of rust. Years later, in a small room at the New Yorker Hotel, I read the newspaper by lamplight. The city's hum, a low vibration through the window glass. The radiator hissed steadily beside the worn armchair where I sat. The article mentioned dynamite crews arriving at dawn. The tower's frame snapping like dry branches under the force. Scrap dealers paid good money for the copper that day, a price I could have used back in 1904. I set the paper down on the desk, the ink smudging slightly under my damp fingertips. Outside, a pigeon landed softly on the windowsill, its gray feathers ruffled by the wind. I watched it peck at crumbs left in the saucer. The soft tap of its beak, the only sound in the room. The radiator ticked its slow rhythm into the silence. I did not move for a long time, the taste of weak tea still on my tongue. My hands rested open on my knees, empty. The dream had lived in my bones for 20 years, a current I could feel even now beneath the city streets. Sunlight fell gently across the worn velvet armchair near the window of room 3327. Dust motes drifted in the quiet air above the simple writing desk where notebooks lay open. The faint city hum outside remained muffled, a distant murmur beneath the steady rhythm of the radiator. A single pigeon feather rested on the windowsill beside an empty saucer that once held breadcrumbs. The afternoon light warmed the faded wallpaper, casting long shadows that slowly shifted across the plain wooden floorboards. Silence filled the room, broken only by the soft ticking of a small clock on the mantelpiece. The view overlooked a quiet alley where laundry lines hung slack between brick buildings. A stray cat stretched in a patch of sun below. Its movements slow and deliberate, this room held the residue of many quiet afternoons spent watching the world pass by. I had always believed the earth itself could carry energy, a pulse beneath our feet waiting to be shared. The Colorado Springs experiments proved it to me, the lamps lighting wirelessly in the dark, the ground humming with potential. Wardenclyffe was meant to be the bridge, the copper dome gathering the planet's own rhythm. Morgan wanted a telegraph machine, something to sell by the word, but I saw villages lit by the same current that powered New York. The blueprints showed receivers in farmhouses, schools, hospitals, all drawing from the same source. I remember standing on the tower platform one evening. The Long Island shore spread before me, the air smelling of salt and pine resin. The first stars appeared as the last light bled from the sky, and for a moment, the whole structure felt alive with possibility. The wood creaked softly beneath my boots, a sound like breathing. Later, in the city, I would sketch the egg of Columbus in my notebooks. Its polished brass curves a relic from the Chicago Fair, a reminder of how alternating current had won the earlier war. The egg of Columbus device stood untouched in my earlier laboratory, its brass base tarnished dark with age. Its copper coils held the memory of the first demonstration. The way it spun so smoothly on the alternating current. Visitors had gathered around it in 1893, their faces lit by the whirling egg, a marvel that proved the current's power. Now it sat silent in the dust, a relic of battles already won. The war of currents had been decided long before Wardenclyffe, but this new dream felt deeper, more essential. I carried its ghost with me through the years, a quiet companion in the hotel room. The radiator's tick marked the hours as I sat by the window, watching pigeons circle the rooftops. Their wings made a soft rushing sound against. The New Yorker hotel room smelled of dust and old paper, the wallpaper peeling near the ceiling where the steam pipes ran. I kept the window open year-round for the pigeons, even when snow drifted across the sill in January. The air carried the scent of wet pavement and distant bakeries as I counted the steps from the bed to the table. Exactly 23. 3 hand washings with cold water followed each feeding, the soap worn smooth and thin in my palm. Women in pearls made my skin prickle. I'd turn away without explanation. Bryant Park grass held the chill of early morning under my shoes as I scattered crumbs near the fountain, the pigeons clustering like gray clouds on the wet stone. A single white bird with soft gray wing tips came most days, her head tilting as she studied my face. She was smaller than the others, her movements precise and quiet. I saved the softest crumbs for her alone. The saucer held 3 breadcrumbs each afternoon, no more, no less. My birthday interviews continued at the New Yorker, reporters scribbling notes about cosmic rays, while I traced the pattern of cracks in the ceiling plaster. The particle beam would stop armies at borders. I told them, though the sketches stayed folded in my pocket. The city's hum was a constant vibration in the floorboards, felt through the soles of my worn slippers. The porcelain dish sat empty on the table, its rim chipped near the handle, where a feather had caught during cleaning. Morning light showed the faint grace mark from yesterday's buttered roll. Feathers clung to the legs of the chair, gray and white mingling with the wood grain. An old notebook lay open to a page of calculations. The ink slightly smudged where my sleeve had brushed it. The mantel clock ticked steadily, its sound blending with the distant rush of traffic. Rain tapped softly against the window pane, a rhythm I counted in sets of 7. The room held only what was necessary: the bed, the chair, the table, the quiet. Outside, a lone pigeon cooed from the ledge, its call muffled by the glass. She flew into my room one afternoon in 1922, the light catching her wings like frosted glass. Her breathing was shallow, her chest rising and falling with effort against my palm. I felt the last warmth leave her as the light in her eyes shifted, a soft, white glow that seemed to fill the space between us before fading into the room. Her body grew light in my hands, the weight disappearing all at once. I sat with her on the windowsill until dusk, the city lights blinking awake below. That light stayed with me, a quiet ember in the long nights after. I never married. The thought of another person's breath in the room felt too loud. Solitude was my constant companion, as familiar as the ache in my joints. The white pigeon with gray tips had been my anchor, her presence a fixed point in the drifting hours. After she left, the park felt emptier, the crumbs scattering without purpose. I counted the tiles on the ceiling instead, finding patterns in their cracks. Sleep remained elusive, a visitor who never stayed long. The hotel walls absorbed my footsteps, the rhythm unchanged for decades. The alternating current motor-powered streetcars across Europe while I sat on Bryant Park benches, watching sparrows bathe in puddles. My hands trembled slightly when I counted the buttons on my coat, always 3 times before rising from the chair. The aversion to pearls began after a woman dropped a necklace near the fountain. The beads rolled across the path like tiny eyes. I avoided them after that, the sight of them tightening my throat. The hotel staff swept feathers from the hallway each morning without comment, their brooms whispering against the linoleum. George Scherf sent letters from the office, his handwriting steady and clear on the thin paper. I reread them in the dim lamp light, tracing the ink with my finger. His words were a tether to the world beyond the park gates. The Egg of Columbus demonstration felt like a lifetime ago, the brass apparatus gleaming under Fifth Avenue's gaslights. I remembered the smell of ozone after the coils sparked, the way Mark Twain's laughter echoed in the lab. Those rooms were warmer then, the wood benches smooth under my elbows. Now the New Yorker's corridors echoed with my own footsteps alone. Bryant Park at dawn held a profound stillness, the air cool and damp with dew. Early sunlight filtered through the bare branches of old oak trees, casting long, soft shadows across the empty benches. A few sparrows hopped cautiously across the wet grass, searching for scattered seeds near the path's edge. The fountain's edge was slick with moss, its water dark and still. Pigeon feathers clung to the iron bench where I sat, damp from the night's rain. The distant rumble of the first subway train vibrated through the soles of my shoes. A single cloud drifted across the pale sky, its edges tinged with rose. The scent of wet earth and distant coffee shops filled the quiet space. My hands rested on the bench, the knuckles swollen and stiff in the morning chill. The Wardenclyffe Tower site stood, abandoned by the shore, the field overgrown with tall grasses, where I'd dreamed of wireless power. I visited once after the foreclosure, the rusted foundation barely visible under the weeds. The salt wind carried the smell of the ocean, sharp and cold. No one spoke of the project anymore. The financiers had turned their eyes elsewhere. My annual birthday interviews grew shorter, the reporters fewer, their questions simpler. They asked about death sometimes, as if it were a machine I could explain. I told them the light from the pigeon's eyes was real, not a dream. They wrote it down carefully, their pens scratching on notepaper. The saucer held 3 breadcrumbs each afternoon, no more, no less. The ritual was a compass, steady when the world tilted. Sleeplessness was a familiar companion, its presence as constant as the city's pulse. I watched the pigeons through the window, their wings catching the street lamp glow at midnight. The room's silence was deep, broken only by the clock's steady beat. A single feather lay on the floor near the door, gray at the tip. I left it there, a small mark of her passing. The city's electrical grid hummed with my early work, lighting homes I'd never enter. I felt the vibration in the floor when I washed my hands 3 times at the sink. The soap left a faint film on the porcelain, rinsed away each time. Women in pearls walked past the hotel entrance, their laughter sharp in the lobby. I turned my face to the window, counting the pigeons on the ledge. 23 steps to the table, then back again. The notebook pages filled with calculations for beams that would end war, though the math felt distant now. George Scharf's last letter arrived on thin, blue paper the ink slightly blurred. I read it 3 times before placing it in the drawer. The park bench held the shape of my body after years of afternoons, the wood worn smooth under my weight. Sparrows hopped near my feet, pecking at crumbs I'd scattered without counting. The white pigeon's absence was a hollow space, a silence deeper than the room's quiet. I traced the pattern of cracks in the ceiling, finding new paths in their lines. The city's heartbeat pulsed through the walls, a rhythm that never slept. My own heart slowed steadily, its beats measured and sure. The light from the pigeon's eyes remained, a small ember glowing in the long night. I felt it there as I lay down, the room holding its breath. The final morning came softly, the window open to the gray sky. The saucer sat empty on the table, 3 crumbs untouched. The clock ticked on, marking time after time had passed. Room 3327 on the 33rd floor held the quiet of a winter morning. The window left open for the pigeons as always. I lay still in the narrow bed, the thin blanket pulled up to my chin. The city sounds were muffled by the glass. A distant hum of traffic and the occasional siren. My heart had stopped some time before the maid came. She knocked twice, then turned the handle. She found me lying on my back, the sheets smooth around me. The worn armchair faced the window, overlooking a quiet corner of midtown Manhattan. Faint street sounds drifted upwards through the slightly open sash, muffled by the city's rhythm. Sunlight traced slow paths across the simple wooden dresser and narrow bed. An old suitcase rested against the wall, its leather cracked with age. The air carried the faint, lingering scent of pipe tobacco and old paper. Feathers, soft gray and pure white, were scattered across the worn wooden floorboards near the open window. An empty porcelain dish, once holding breadcrumbs, sat beside a stack of meticulously folded napkins on a small table. I would count the napkins exactly 3 times before eating. Washing my hands 3 times in succession was necessary. I avoided contact with women wearing pearls, a habit with no clear reason. The rhythmic cooing of pigeons perched on the sill provided a gentle counterpoint to distant traffic. One particular white pigeon held a special place in my affections. I described loving this bird with a depth comparable to human romantic love. This connection offered profound comfort during isolation. Sleeplessness became a persistent companion, affecting daily routines and energy levels profoundly. I developed specific rituals to manage anxieties and maintain order. Counting objects precisely was a necessary habit before routine activities. Chronic insomnia plagued me consistently throughout my long life. The reporters were kind during annual birthday interviews, listening to claims of death rays and Mars communication. They never laughed at the particle beam weapons. Their notebooks filled with my words, then closed gently. The city continued its usual rhythms outside, unaware of the quiet departure within room 3327. Officials discovered my body the following day, after I failed to answer the door. My room contained notes and calculations, evidence of an active mind until the very end. Most were old calculations, nothing secret. The FBI took the papers later. The room settled into the evening calm of January 7th. Gaslight softened the edges of the simple furniture. Though electricity powered the single lamp beside the bed, the scent of aged paper and beeswax polish lingered in the still air. A single stack of notebooks rested on the small table near the window. Outside, the distant hum of early electric trams faded as night deepened. Faint street lamps cast long, steady shadows across empty sidewalks below. The space held only the soft scratch of a pen and turning pages. Dust motes drifted peacefully in the warm, yellow light beams. Silence gradually enveloped the room, heavy and undisturbed. Cool night air seeped subtly through the window frame. Such spaces nurtured reflection far from the factory floors transforming America. The weight of books promised understanding without urgency. My later years were marked by increasing isolation and financial hardship, despite earlier scientific triumphs. The visionary who once commanded attention with spectacular electrical demonstrations lived quietly in modest surroundings. The ambitious Wardenclyffe Tower project aimed at wireless communication and power transmission ultimately failed. Financial difficulties forced me to take a mortgage on the property with George C. Bolt, associated with the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, eventually foreclosed on the Wardenclyffe site. The tower itself was demolished and sold for scrap metal in 1917. This marked the end of my most grandiose vision. Industrialists sought practical applications, while scientists pursued theoretical breakthroughs simultaneously. The political environment encouraged innovation, but offered little safety net for failed ventures. Economic power increasingly concentrated within large corporate entities shaping national development. I never married, dedicating my existence entirely to my work and avian companions. His alternating current system became the foundation for modern electrical grids across continents. This technological choice shaped how humanity harnesses and distributes power globally for generations. Direct current systems saw limited use initially, but found new applications much later. The initial victory for alternating current defined the infrastructure of the modern world. The original egg of Columbus device, a marvel from the Columbian Exposition, remained a centerpiece in my New York laboratory. It stayed within my laboratory for subsequent demonstrations to visitors and potential backers. This brass and copper artifact